today I just want to spend 15 minutes or so on sharing with you what I'm trying to do to make my railway look a bit more lived in, as it were. So I'm just going through a series of PowerPoint slides. There's only about 7 here, just to take you through what I've done and how I've tried to do it. So what you can see here is a builder's yard, and there's various people there. They're made with the human maker thing, and then I do it quite simply. I just make a model that I want in human maker, get it dressed the way I want it dressed, and then put that model into Blender, pose it, save it, pose it, save it, pose it, save it, etc. And then when I've got sort of 8, 9, 10 models, as I said last time, I'll mirror them all in Chitterbox so that you end up getting a variety of poses. And you can see there, for example, our guy here reading the paper. You can see him sat here over on a box. The cart is all 3D printed. You can see that over here. The label on it is ordinary print on the ordinary deskjet inkjet printer. I always use photographic paper for this sort of thing because you get a nice crisp finish to it, and I tend to use a matte paper rather than the gloss one. And then you've got to, obviously the difficult bit is cutting it and fitting it. The wagon you can see there is just filled with old bits of, there's a couple of PCB spaces in there, and just bits of little junk which has been then lightly painted brownish to appear rusty, as it were. The beer barrels you can see over here on this side. The sign above the door, I tend to do 3D print on little things, and you can see that down here where I've just created it in 3D, and this incidentally was printed on a filament printer, not a resin printer. The horse and cart was on resin and the figures were on resin. And then you can see further along up here, of note may be the line side fencing. You may recognize this. This is similar to the Pico fencing, where Pico supply you with the posts and some stupid plastic stuff that you feed through. A little tip on that I found is that plastic stuff is quite brittle. I print the posts now on the resin printer, 100 at a time on the bed with little holes in them, and I super glue them all in position, and then the painstaking bit then is sat there and I thread tinned wire through, something like 28 gauge. And as you may know, if you sort of catch on one end and the other end and stretch it, you can pull a curve out of it and you get a nice straight piece of wire that I then feed through the holes with a bright light, a magnifying glass and a pair of tweezers. But at the end of the day, the result is worth it. I've got yards of the stuff on the layout, and I think it looks quite tidy, and is much more durable than the Pico stuff. So we'll move on to the next slide. Where are we? Let's see let's get rid of that thing a minute. Next one is I'm looking at a small goods platform I've got, and with some bits and pieces here. This GW wagon here is the one that's been hand printed. I'll show you that later on. Again, we got the beer barrels coming in and the milk churns coming in. And as somebody once said on a group some time ago, when you buy these in a half dozen pack for £5, you can't afford any more. And really, these things look much better when there's a pile of them rather than just ones and twos. The sack truck was a bit of a challenge. That's resin printed, and you can see it's quite small, but it did come out, and it was printed on a slight angle, with the wheels being the base, as it were, on supports and a raft. And again, now some station staff. One of the problems with humankind is it's not very good with uniforms. And the uniform that I've got on here, I think the colour of it and the style of it, maybe it's a Korean army or something like that. But that doesn't matter, because when it's all painted in a very dark blue or black, as I've done here, and carefully put a bit of a white shirt and a red tie, it suffices as station staff. The fencing, again, all 3D printed, and the lamps These lamps are not made with 3D, but I'll come on to my lamps later on. Moving on to a street scene. Again, now we can see a grey cart here, very similar to the previous cart. I'll show you a close-up picture of that in the next slide. Dustbin, old-fashioned style dustbin. I'm doing pre-war stuff. So you've got a guy here carrying the dustbin out of the cart, old-style cart. And again, the figures on the cart, let me just put my, here you are. The figures on the cart are there. And I've also got the number of women that I've done in different sizes. And I think, as I said on a previous meeting, once I've got a figure, I'll create a second figure by mirroring it and shutterbox, and I'll create a couple more by reducing their size slightly in both the X, Y and Z axis, or increasing it slightly. I find that a lot easier to do than muck about in Blender. The street lamp here, I've changed the design slightly, and what I do with those, I don't know whether I've done this with this group, I've done it with the Cardiff group, is it's a length of 1.8mm copper tube. I 3D print the base that slides on, and I 3D print the top. I use small grain of wheat tungsten bulbs because I want that yellowy glow, which I don't think you can get with LEDs to the same degree. And the bicycle, of course, which we've had on previous sessions here, I haven't got round to printing the spokes yet. And this is the dray cart, and you can see there how it's done. The reins are just short lengths of lacing cord that I've glued in place and then put a little bit of brown paint on, and beer barrels in the back, and a little bit of a sort of rope guard to stop them falling off. Unfortunately, I can't get a very good photograph of my pub, but if you can follow it, this is all card scratch built, but the pub front there is down here. So hopefully you can get the idea for it. And that fits on the corner, and this is the inside. Now you might say, oh, those chairs are not very realistic. When you're looking through these small windows and you've got this painted in some muted colours, and you've got some people sat around, and you've got behind here a scene that you've pulled off the internet from somewhere, and some lighting up above, it looks very realistic. Not one for rivet counters, but I believe in things looking good, not necessarily looking perfect. The dray cart, again, you can see that's it in its raw state, and then the sign is this one here, half printed, small little 1/2mm holes and little 1/2mm bits of wire going up from the side there to hold the top on. This will have a name plate put on it. I haven't got round to doing it yet. Now we look at a straight scene, which is a little bit more. Again, if to give you an idea, the pub is up that end there, and that's the dray cart. These shop fronts are there, again 3D printed, and the insides, which I can't find the STL for, the counter is 3D printed, or the shelf in the window, the counter is, and there's a display stand as well. I don't have a photograph of that to hand. Sorry about the quality, they're all done with an old mobile phone to get in close. But that's how the shop front is done, 3D printed in that go, and there's 4 of them along there. The windows up here are done like this. You have a flange, so they're pushed in from the back, and the flange then glues against the card. And I've just put in there 2 other types of windows. That's a window that I've got on a goods shed, and these are the doors that are actually at the back of this building, which you can't see in this photograph. And there's the telephone box on the side. And what you can't quite see on this is when you get, although this one is scratch built, it's obviously an idea from the old Metcalf kit, but they come with things like paper ridge tiles. Whereas if you print your ridge tile, so I print, that's the plain ridge, that's a nice one with the little pointy bits on like you get in old houses. And this wall here with capping stone on, I print out lengths of capping stone as well. This is the platform area on the left. This is my benches. These are printed in one go. They're printed on the flat on the bed with a couple of supports underneath just to stop the seat part from sinking. The station sign is there, and you can see it's printed there. That again is that's a resin print, and then that's the bases you can just see, and some 1.5mm brass rod between the two to give you the station one. The small ones that you can't quite see up here, they're just printed on photographic paper and stuck either side of the post. And the lamps are as I described earlier. And there's some samples, STL, of the girls in the playground, where I've got a variety of it's a girls' school, small junior school sort of thing, and they're all in the same uniform, which made it a bit easier to paint because it's all the same colour. And again, I had a couple of different girls, as you can see, one without a ponytail, one with a ponytail, but then different poses, different heights to create a group there in that way. The doors here 3D printed, as is the small door there. And that's that one. And then on the last slide, just a random selection of the sort of things we've got. The AA box you've seen before, the telephone box and the post box, the sign, the water cranes that I use, the level crossing gates that I use, which are based on real life ones at Park End Station on the Forest of Dean, the mink wagon here that John's been making, a similar version but a cattle wagon, which I think John is yet to make, and the 7-plank wagon. And as I think I've explained before, they're all on the same standard GWR base, and you just get different tops on them.